All right, good evening, everybody. I want to be respectful of your time, so I appreciate everyone being here, and we're here tonight to hear you and hear your thoughts and really what your comments are regarding the report about the release and what we can do to make sure that you're getting your questions answered. So with that, I will turn it over to Supervisor Federal Glover, who represents the district that has been impacted, and look forward to his comments. And again, welcome you again.
Thank you. I really want to first off thank the community for their patience, the resilience, and understanding while CCHP and the community, CCH community has conducted this community risk assessment. I especially want to thank the community members who have sat on the committee and given many hours towards understanding what happened the night of the release, its potential effect on our community, and how to prevent this from ever happening again. We are relieved that CCHP report determined that the Martinez Refining Company released on November did not measurably contaminate the soil. The report has shown that the metals detected in 14 soil samples, both in Contra Costa and Solano, fell within the range typically found in the state. The report did not find evidence that the incident increased those levels. I will note that MRC remains under investigation by law enforcement for not notifying authorities about the release. 20 to 24 tons of waste released into the air and covering nearby communities. The DA office is still considering taking legal action. You can contact the DA's office for updates. It should also be noted that the root cause analysis of the release is still under investigation by CCH and the Oversight Committee. Supervisor John Joya and I have directed CCH to work with the committee to conduct a safety cultural assessment of MRC to determine the status of the safety culture within the refineries. I, like each of you, are anxious to hear the findings of the work that is being done and understand what the safety culture is within the refinery that will make our community safer. With that, I will turn the floor over to Betsy Burkhart.
Thank you, Supervisor Glover. And again, thank you all for being here. We're very appreciative of your giving your time and hopefully tonight your thoughts. I'm going to ask Matt Kaufman from Contra Costa Health Services to introduce our next segment.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Kaufman, one of the deputy directors here with the Contra Costa County Health Department. First, I want to thank all of our community members for being here. As Betsy did say at the beginning, we are very interested in hearing from you, understanding your concerns, and hopefully answering your questions, especially as it relates to the community risk assessment that we performed as a result of the release that occurred back in November. I do want to start off by giving the floor just briefly to Michael Kent to introduce himself. He's with the Contra Costa County Health Department and has a unique role. So Michael, maybe you can introduce yourself and then we'll do a quick presentation and get to public comment.
Thank you, Matt. Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Kent. I am the ombudsman for the county's hazardous materials program. And what that means is my job is to make sure to help residents who have questions or complaints about the hazardous materials program get answers to those questions and complaints. It's an independent role that the county set up in 1998 to make sure that there was good flow of communication between the hazardous materials program and the public. I'm here tonight. If there are questions that aren't getting answered or aren't clear, I'll try to help facilitate that if it's necessary. But in general, I'm always available to work with people if they have questions or concerns that they don't feel are being addressed from the hazardous materials program. So again, I also want to thank you all for being here and turn it back to Matt.
Okay. So I am not Nicole Heath. Nicole, unfortunately, is sick tonight. Nicole is the Director of Hazardous Materials Division for Contra Costa County. I've been with the county for about 15 years. The majority of my time was in the Hazardous Materials Division. I inspected refineries, gas stations, all of those sorts of things that have hazardous materials in our community. So I'm intimately familiar with the work, but I am not Nicole. My name is Matt. Next slide. Okay, so here's a sort of the run of show tonight. It's going to be very simple. We've already had some opening remarks from our supervisor for this area, Federal Glover. We're going to talk a bit about the risk assessment that was performed. And I'll be sort of introducing that, but the majority of the time will be presented by a company called TRC, which the oversight committee that's been overseeing this investigation hired, and they're toxicologists. They're experts in this field, and they did the majority of this work, and they're going to be reporting out on the work that they did. And then most importantly, we're really here for public comment. And that comment could be general comments that you have, but also questions that maybe we need to answer, or that you have curiosities about that we need to dive further into. Okay, next slide. So just a bit about the incident overview. I think the majority of us know this, but back on Thanksgiving last year, almost a year ago now, November 24th, there was a release from the refinery that started in the evening hours and went into the next day, Friday, and happened overnight. The total amount released is somewhere between 20 to 24 tons of a material that's called spent catalyst that's used at the refinery. And as a result of that, there was a white dust material that spread up into the air and all over the community, primarily in the Martinez area and in the Pacheco areas where it was observed. And so you can see here on the picture that's on the left on the slide, it sort of had a almost like a snowing, a light dusting of material that was observed throughout the community, again in downtown Martinez area. But it looked, and we found it on cars, garbage cans, rooftops. So it did definitely spread throughout the community, but it had a white powdery substance appearance, like the picture on the left there. Based on air modeling that was done by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, it did indicate that portions of Benicia could have been affected as well. So Benicia, or Solano County, was also incorporated into the oversight of this investigation. So they have a city representative on this investigation as well. Because hazardous material releases don't really know county boundaries. Unfortunately, this one, at least based on the plume model, indicated that it did go into Benicia. So we've incorporated that portion of Solano County into this investigation. Next slide, Michael. Okay, so a bit about the Contra Costa County Health Department. You'll see CCH, that's our abbreviation. A bit about our actions. Unfortunately, the health department did not find out about this release until Saturday, the 26th. So it was a few days later, but immediately upon learning about the incident, we had our incident response team, which are members of the Hazardous Materials Division within the health department, immediately responded out to the scene. The scene ended up being, again, downtown Martinez, where we found this material. And we did what's called wipe samples, which is very simple. You're wiping a portion of an area and you're collecting a portion of what was released or what was found on that surface, and we sent it off to the lab. The lab results did indicate that there were metals, and the main ingredient within this catalyst were found in these locations. So we immediately classified this as what we call a major chemical accident or release. And that sounds like a big term, and it sort of is, but really what that means is from a regulatory perspective, it allows the county to investigate this incident, which is what we've been doing. So we classified it as a major chemical accident, I think about 2 to 3 weeks after we got the results back from the lab and sort of had a better understanding of what the release entailed. Again, Because we weren't notified at the time of the incident, we really didn't have a lot to go on. We were going based on where we found it in the community and what the samples said. Shortly thereafter, in January, we concluded our investigation and we made a referral to the district attorney who continues to look into this incident. And they're investigating and will decide if they're going to bring enforcement actions against the refinery. In terms of our long-term actions, we've initiated a few things. The first is this community risk assessment, which we're here to find out about tonight. And TRC, the contractor, is going to present their findings. But also, we did an internal safety inspection. We also set up an oversight committee, and many of you, I think there's members of the public actually here that are on the oversight committee. This oversight committee is really in charge of figuring out which contractors are going to investigate the refinery and then receiving reports from those contractors that investigate the refinery. So the oversight committee has already seen this presentation. They've had the majority of their questions answered, and so now we're with the public, you all, to present our findings. We did the risk assessment, like I said. We're also doing an incident investigation. And what the incident investigation is it really looks at the root causes of the incident to attempt to determine what actually caused the incident and how do we prevent this in the future. So that is really the goal of the root cause analysis, and that's going on right now. And then the last thing that Supervisor Federal Glover just indicated, we've also been directed to do what's called a safety culture assessment to dive into, at the refinery, what is the safety culture? How do people normally operate? Do employees feel empowered? What do they do when people aren't looking? That sort of thing. The culture that exists within the refinery to determine if there's areas that that are needed for improvement and relay those findings to the refinery itself. Next slide. Okay, so the industrial safety ordinance is pretty unique to Contra Costa County. It's an ordinance here local in the county, but really for major chemical accidents and releases, it allows us to do a few things. And that is we are independently investigating the incident. So the refinery is required to do an investigation, but also the county health department, independent of the refinery's investigation, we are doing our own. And that's being done by oversight from the oversight committee. We're also one of the tenets of the industrial safety ordinance really is grounded in environmental justice. And that being that we really want to have the community involved in this process. So that is why there is an oversight committee. That is why we do public meetings. That is why we gain comments, and we have a 45-day comment period for you all to tell us, ask us questions, because we really value your opinion, and we want you to feel empowered as community members as a result of this incident. Next slide. Okay, so public participation. Again, it's a key tenet of the industrial safety ordinance. Our oversight committee has I think now there's 5 community members on it. So there's a lot of community participation that's been overseeing this investigation. It has quite a few different folks on it though. It's chaired by the health department, but there's also Martinez Refining Company staff and management on that oversight committee. Again, there's community members, 5 of them, and then we have city representatives from the city of Martinez and Benicia. Next slide. Okay, so here's where we are in this process, just so everyone can sort of lay it out. This is a bit of a snake, but really we formed the oversight committee many months ago. They selected and hired a contractor. The county health department ultimately went with their oversight committee's recommendation, but TRC was selected by the oversight committee. That contractor has done their investigation. They presented a draft report to the oversight committee, had their questions answered, and now we're in this 45-day public comment period for this. And there's a public meeting that's associated with this. So what you'll hear next is Jenny Phillips, who's with TRC, is going to present the findings that the consultant found as a result of their investigation. And remember, this is just for the community risk assessment, so just the soil sampling that was done. Also under investigation through this oversight committee is the root cause analysis as well as a safety culture assessment. And there will be 2 other meetings that address just the root causes and the safety culture. So there's more to come. This is just the community risk assessment portion. Next slide. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Jenny Phillips, who's actually remote, and she's gonna present on TRC's findings. Again, TRC is a contractor selected by the Oversight Committee to do this work. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jenny.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you for having me join you. I have about a dozen slides or so, but we'll go through pretty quickly after the first few. So next slide, please. As Matt shared with you, the spent catalyst release occurred in November of 2022, and that has really set into motion a whole chain of assessment and evaluation. First, there was the physical evidence, right? The white powder that was observed on surfaces, and then the county conducted dust sampling and determined that the dust was consistent with the spent catalyst. And then also plume modeling was conducted to guide the soil testing that TRC performed. And that's what I'm going to really talk about and share with you pretty quickly here. So the next slide. TRC assisted Costa County with the soil sampling and then subsequently with a screening level risk assessment. And I'm going to explain both of those to you. First, the soil sampling. We collected soil data at 14 locations based on the plume modeling and also based on what we heard from the community. So we are focusing on locations where maximum deposition of spent catalyst dust would have occurred based on the modeling that was discussed on the previous slide. And I'm going to show you the locations on the next slide, but I will finish on this slide first. So there were 14 metals that were analyzed, and those were the metals that are expected to be found in spent catalyst. And the primary metals found in spent catalyst dust are aluminum, vanadium, nickel, and barium. Next, we did an assessment of the potential for adverse risk. And it was a screening level risk assessment, which means that it was a comparison of the soil data to published state screening levels that are protective of residential land use. And then we also compared the soil sampling results to regional background levels. So next slide, please. This is all contained in the report. This is a figure that shows the soil sampling locations. And as you can see, they're spread out pretty well. And again, were selected based on the plume modeling and input that we got from the community. Next slide. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the process now and what we did. We compared soil data to the expected range of regional background soil levels. And then we also compared the soil data to protective health standards for residential soil. Well, what does that mean, right? So the first thing is background. What is background? Well, that's the naturally occurring or maybe other non-site related levels of chemicals. Could be it's present from cars, from household use of chemicals. It occurs naturally, it's in the environment. And then we compared soil. What's in the soil? Well, that has something to do with geology, right? Metals are present primarily simply due to the geology. So in California, it's known to have metals in proportions to regional and local geology. And then health standards. Those are California specific screening levels for protection of residential land use. And according to guidance provided by the California Department of Toxic Substances and Control, you will hear me refer to them as DTSC, metals occur naturally in soil and in water at all over, and also at hazardous waste sites, right? But risk assessment should eliminate from consideration those whose range of concentrations fall within the range of local ambient conditions. And this is done by comparing concentrations of, in this case, metals at the site to a body of data that's representative of local conditions unaffected by site-related activities. Therefore, the site data was compared to a range of regional background levels. And if the concentrations detected on site were within that range, then there's no cause of adverse risk concern. So background can range from localized concentrations to ubiquitous concentrations. And again, California is known to have metals associated with their soil. So for example, arsenic is known to be present in igneous and metamorphic rock, both of which are prominent in California and in the Bay Area. And this is important because as I'll show you in some upcoming graphs, for one metal in particular arsenic, the health-based screening level for residential land use is lower than the measured concentration. And that's often the case with arsenic, as the background level is typically present at levels of 1 to 40 milligrams per kilogram, and health-based screening levels for arsenic are down at 0.1 milligrams per kilogram. So we're going to talk about that more when I get to that slide, but I want to introduce to you these kinds of concepts, okay? Lastly, as related to health standards, the comparison values for soil data are the residential receptor screening levels. And those are, again, DTSC defined criteria that assume that a person spends most, if not all, of the day at home. The activities for those residents include typical home chores like cooking, cleaning, and laundering, as well as outdoor activities. The resident is assumed to be exposed to contaminants via incidental ingestion of soil, dermal contact with soil, inhalation of volatiles, and inhalation of fugitive dust. So for this assessment, the residential soil health standard was used as it's the strictest one. We realize that there are other land uses in the area, but the residential is the strictest, and we wanted to do that assessment to address the concerns of the Martinez residents who wanted to know if their homes were safe, right? So that's the definitions, background, geology, health standards. You'll hear me refer to them. And then quickly, I'm going to show you some graphs, and the graphs include soil samples only. The units are in parts per million, ppm, which is the same as milligrams per kilogram, which is shown on the graph. And we have some colors on the graph, including green shading for background, yellow lines for residential soil health standards, and the blue dots for the sample concentrations. And I'm going to go through those with you. So next slide, please. The first slide we're going to go through is aluminum, and I'm going to share a good bit of information, and then the others will be pretty easy to get through. So just to orient you on this slide, the blue dots represent the concentration of aluminum in soil at the location label shown in the x-axis across the bottom. The concentrations are reported in units of milligram per kilogram or ppm, as we said on the previous slide. The y-axis, or the left side of the scale, is the soil concentrations and the comparison values. So now those scales, they're going to change on all the slides because it has to do with what is the range of background and what are the screening levels. So kind of keep your eyes on the left. The samples are going to go along the bottom. The concentrations are going to go along the left-hand side, or the y-axis. And there are two different comparison values shown. The yellow line is the California DTSC screening level for residential land use. And the shaded green area is that background that we've been talking about. It's the range of aluminum that's found within this region of California. And that concentration is between 58,000 and 71,000 milligrams per kilogram. So aluminum is the main metal component in the catalyst. And luckily, it's considered a relatively safe metal in the environment. And you know that because we drink soda pop and all in aluminum cans, right? But as you can see in this assessment, all of the results, the blue dots, are below the health-based screening levels for residents, and they're within the range of the regional background. So this is good news, good news. And now we're just going to go through the remainder of the metals. Next slide, please. For arsenic, again, we have the blue dots that all occur within the green shaded area. And we also have the residential soil health standard, which is down lower, it is below background, and that is very, very typical for arsenic. And so for arsenic, we if the concentrations are within the range of background, then there is not concern that the arsenic is a health hazard. And we will go to the next one. For barium now, as you can see, all concentrations are within the background range and below the screening level. We're just going to kind of cruise through these. Beryllium is the next one. In beryllium, it's A-okay. All of the soil concentrations are within that green level and below the yellow line of the residential soil health standard. The next one is chromium. And for this graph, we use the screening level for trivalent chromium, which is a type of chromium that is closest to total chromium, which the laboratory analyzed for, and all the measured concentrations are acceptable and below the line. But we also analyzed for a different type of chromium called hexavalent chromium. That is a more toxic form. And the results of that analysis showed that all of the samples were non-detect. So all of the detection limits were below the screening level. And that was good news again. Next one is cobalt. And in cobalt here, this is one where you see the scale has changed. You know, it's a smaller scale. And again, all of the samples are below the background and below the residential soil health standard. Next slide. Copper is the same. Next slide. Lead. For lead here, all of the samples are below the yellow line and within the green box, which is good, except for the very first sample. That sample, MRC-1, is just above the screening level of 80 milligrams per kilogram at 82. However, it is within that area of background. And lead is another chemical that many times has high background ranges, as can be seen right here by the range of 3.3 to 247. And it's not uncommon to find lead within or above, even above background concentrations. And as an example, I grew up in a mining town in Colorado, Leadville, and we had background level lead in the percentage range. So there can be huge variability. For this site, you know, mostly all good news. We're right at the screening level, residential health screening level, or below it, and all within the background concentration. Next slide, molybdenum. It was non-detect. So it was not found in any of the samples below the screening level and within the background. Next slide, nickel, all at the low end of the range, as many other of the metals have also been, and below the health standard. Next slide. Selenium. It was non-detect in these samples at concentrations below the screening level and within background. And next slide, vanadium. So vanadium was detected. It was found within the background range and below the screening level. And then the last one is zinc. And zinc, again, has that good story of very low or non-detected concentrations and below the screening level. So as my last slide, I will just share with you the conclusions of our assessment. None of the metals analyzed exceeded the regional background range, which is great news. You know, you have a very valid question. We did the analysis and very thoroughly and found that the concentrations were within that regional background range. Only 2 metals exceeded the screening levels protective of residential human health. And those were for arsenic and lead in only 1 sample. And the exceedances there are not likely to be associated with spec catalyst. So how do we know that? Well, that's because back at the beginning, when we talked at the, 10 minutes ago, Matt talked to you about the wipe samples that were done, and I mentioned them. And that when that sampling was done, we were able to look at the composition of the dust, what was found in the dust, in the spec catalyst dust, and the metals that were found were not predominantly arsenic or lead. They again were aluminum and nickel, vanadium, and maybe some barium. So we do not expect that the arsenic and lead are associated with this incident. They are likely just present in background concentrations and were within the background range. And then, so based on the findings, TRC is not recommending additional sampling or evaluation at this time. And with that, I will hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Jenny. And now what we'd like to do is actually really literally turn it over to you. We invited you here tonight to have an opportunity to give your comments about the report and the situation. What we'll do is we will copy down any questions that you have and take those at the end. But for now, we're gonna have anybody who would like to make a public comment. You've got a platform, and I would just ask you to raise your hands. There are microphones all around the room. So you'll be heard both on the screen and in the room. So if anybody who would like to comment, please raise your hand.
Can I just talk from here?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Microphones are on.
So, I think that the refinery is a health hazard and it's unsustainable. And the only safe resolution is to shut the refinery down and restore it to open space. And that's my comment.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name is Quanah Parker Brightman. I'm Executive Director of the United Native Americans. I'm here to bring voice to the voiceless, which is the indigenous population, which land majority of you are illegally occupied. Now, this Martinez Refining Company has a long history of poor maintenance and understaffing dating back to 1915. This site is notorious, their reputation for being a hazardous and unsafe workplace. California ranks third in the nation in oil refining, and currently our state has 17 refineries producing 2 million barrels per day. Yet the current average gas price is $5.36, which is, with all due respect, is bullshit. Okay. Now we as the United Native Americans demand that the FBI, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Department of Justice shut down any and all chronic violators of the Clean Air Act. Clean air enforcement must be vigorously applied to protect human health and our food and water and our wildlife. Communities living around this insidious Martinez Refining Company should not have been exposed to the over 24 tons of highly toxic and highly combustible coke dust. It is disgusting. That is why I'm here today, and I hope that the policymakers and the agencies I mentioned will take this very seriously, because we do. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next. Anybody else in the room like to make a comment? Go ahead.
We have more so questions than comments. Is that applicable now?
I would say for now, go ahead and let's hear what you have to say, and we may take questions at the end after we take folks that are online as well.
Okay, thank
Let's hear
you.
your questions.
Our concern is why we weren't notified when it first happened and why CCH wasn't notified when it first happened so that we could bring in our animals and make sure that our families weren't outside breathing this, especially during such a busy holiday weekend as it was, and what the ramifications will be for MRC, not just for future events that happen, because it's likely to happen again, but what are the ramifications going to be for this time? And who's paying, lastly, who's paying for the sampling, the contractors, and for this use of this space today? Those are some of the questions that as community members, I think we'd all love to find out some answers to.
Thank you. Any other comments in the room? Do we have any raised hands on Zoom?
We do, just a second. So we have 5 people. I'm gonna allow Maureen Brennan.
Let's bring Maureen in.
Maureen, if you wanna unmute, you're able to speak.
Hi, Maureen Brennan. I live in Rodeo. I'm concerned that this report minimizes the effects of heavy metals. I'm a biochemist by trade, and heavy metals, in my experience, are the most potent toxins of any, up there with nuclear contaminations, frankly. And why is that? Well, one of the heavy metals discussed tonight gums up it's all at a cellular level, and that's very significant. One of them gums up the mitochondria. Another one gums up the RNA, so your cells can't make proper enzyme. Another affects transport of cell nutrients across the cell membrane, all cellular functions. The damage won't be seen tomorrow or next month. It might be 1 to 3 years before the damage becomes clear. In Rodeo, we get 40,000 tons of ammonia emissions out of P66, but we get a little lung irritation up the nose, but it's not doing damage at that cellular level, and that's very important. These heavy metals are particularly insidious, yet this report seems to minimize them. The background levels seem exceptionally high. Just looking at vanadium, for instance, your report says 46 to 230 is acceptable background levels, yet the vanadium that you tested was 570, 610. It's way over the background. Zinc is another one. You said that the background level up to 474 was okay. And you said in your report tonight that it was down near zero. Not true. When I looked at the report, one was 200, another was 19,000. These are very high levels, way above the background levels. So I'm concerned about that. I really hope that, well, for one, I really hope that MRC might show a little bit of contrition and drop this looming lawsuit over the gas scrubber, because it could be very helpful to protect the public. But I certainly hope that the upcoming safety culture assessment might include a discussion of money, a financial package for the community that has been traumatized, because of processes that are ignored or undermined. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker, AG.
AG, you're able to speak now?
Hi, my name is Alicia Gade, and I'm with Healthy Martinez Refinery Accountability Group. I just had a few questions. This testing, there was a long period of time before the testing was actually done. If this testing had been done right away, would we have gotten different results? In particular, I'd like to know, are there any of these materials that you tested for that have a shorter detectable lifespan? We had historic amount of rains, and there's just that long time period before testing was done. I'd like some more information about how that could have affected results. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, Kathy.
Kathy Carriage, you're able to speak?
Yes. Hi, this is Kathy Carriage. I'm a resident of Benicia. I'm actually with the Benicia Community Air Monitoring Program. I have similar concerns to Lisa about the time that went by prior to the testing taking place, and if these metals could have been washed out of the soil during that time period. I'm also very curious. I mean, we're getting here, the background levels here are background levels from refinery communities. So we're exposed frequently to air pollution, probably much more so than most communities. I'd be really interested in seeing how this would compare to background levels in areas that are not close to refineries or close to freeways, to see exactly, is our soil that much more dangerous than other areas that maybe aren't subject to so much pollution. And I did, I'm trying to think what was on all those charts, but it seems to me like one of them that the background level was above the safety level. So those are my questions.
Thank you very much. Next up, Charles.
Charles Davidson? Charles, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay, go ahead and speak.
Yes, thank you very much. I am very, very concerned about the scientific validity of the TRC study, and I would like clarity, that clarity has to be given about the methodology of the study itself. My concerns are twofold and are based on the apparent unlikelihood of finding refinery-associated heavy metals in the soil, and also of the apparent inappropriateness of TRC's use of the entire 200 square mile entirety of the backmud plume model as being used as a model for the TRC study. Logic states that only 2 sites out of 14 sites of the visible plume deposition should have been investigated, and only those 2 sites and not sites up to 15 miles away, as was done in the TRC study. In a nutshell, was the TRC study even scientifically valid after being completed after 11 atmospheric winter storms? And also, is TRC study was taken also from these 2 sites in the plume model that were closest to the refinery? They were only taken at 6 inches deep soil samplings, and logic states that they should have been taken at multiple levels of depth, even if that. Thank you very much. And I would like some answers to that from the TRC people or from County Hazardous Materials. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And
Ramsey, you should be able to speak.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Brianne Zorn. I am the mayor of the city of Martinez, and it was important to me that I called in this evening and listened alongside some of my residents and other residents who live within the sphere of influence of Martinez. So I had a couple of concerns. I did want to acknowledge Alicia's comment and hope that someone can answer the question. It is a very big deal for many people in Martinez how many months passed between when the release occurred in November and when the soil sampling occurred. So I would very much appreciate a response to her concern. And then I also have a little bit of concern that even though all of the soil data did come back within background levels, there were some that did exceed the health thresholds. And from my perspective, a risk assessment is intended to do an analysis for the community about their exposure to chemicals. And I recognize that for the purposes of the release, maybe that does not need to be done, but we are in a community adjacent to a refinery, and I would have appreciated an additional assessment of whether or not there are any long-term impacts from that increased metals in our soil. And then lastly, I just wanted to ask why, as part of this risk assessment, there was no additional analysis done from the air emissions that occurred in November. I believe there's been some sampling done on that, and I recognize that no real-time data was able to be collected, but I was hoping that someone would maybe be able to answer why we weren't able to do any even hypothetical risk assessment based on that. That's it for me. Thank you.
thank you very much. Next up. Wendy?
So Wendy, you're able to speak?
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just kind of following, my name is Wendy Kay. I also am a member of Healthy Martinez Refinery Accountability Group. So kind of following Brianne Zorn's comment as well as Alicia's, some of us were directly in contact with the dust without knowing what the content was. So I too am questioning what kind of risk assessment will occur for those of us that touched it and didn't know what it was. That being said, it was still on our properties for days before the rains came. So there was a period of time where it was we were exposed to it. And I think those of us who are exposed need to know what the risk is long-term and short. Well, I guess not short as much as long. A second comment is that while the risk assessment addressed soil, I wonder how much is still on surfaces, exterior surfaces of homes, residential properties that are not touched by the rains, and who is doing that assessment to see if it's still in our environment and still may be impacting soil and or exposure. Thank you.
Kathy, Patricia?
Kathy Patrica, member of Healthy Martinez Accountability Group. I have two questions, although I certainly endorse lots of things that other people have said, especially the long-term effects. It's something that's really missing in this report, and the rain and the delay. First, my question, where can I find something in the report about the effects of air and water? Thanks to Wendy for mentioning air, but I think water is particularly important here since it's also alleged that the stormwater drains took in some of this catalyst dust. My second question, it's about the catalyst itself. I know there was a sample of catalyst dust that was taken and probably as a point of comparison or to get the list of metals that you need to study. Now, in a spent catalyst, my understanding is that that's different from a catalyst. So with a spent catalyst, which is what we received, there is kind of well, it needs to be washed off so that it can be recycled and used again. So what about that washed off stuff that didn't get washed off? What is that? Because it seems to me that there's more than metal that was in the catalyst. There were probably several things. So those are my 2 points. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Do we have anybody else on Zoom who would like to comment? If so, please raise your hand on Zoom. I'm not seeing anybody online. Is there anybody else in the room who would like to comment? And I will ask Matt Kaufman from Contra Costa Health to return here. There were a number of questions that came out during the public comments. And Matt, I'll throw it back to you.
Thank you, Betsy. So thank you everyone again for your comments and your questions. I've been furiously sort of taking notes and I'm going to answer questions. And then Jenny, who's the toxicologist that presented earlier, has also been taking some notes and she's going to answer questions that are maybe more technical related to the study. The first question that I heard was, why was the community notified when it first happened? And the health department doesn't know the answer to that question. We're attempting to figure that out through our investigation, and we're extremely concerned about it, which is why we referred the case to the district attorney. The health department sees this as a formal enforcement case. Based on our policy here at the health department, all formal enforcement cases get referred to the district attorney, who can choose to either accept the case and sort of take the case from there on, or refer it back to the health department and we can administratively bring enforcement fines, penalties, those sorts of things against the facility. In this case, the district attorney has chosen to accept the referral. So the enforcement part of this case is in the district attorney's hands, but we definitely see your perspective that this they should have notified. The refinery routinely notifies the health department of things that are happening all the time for flaring, other incidents. So it is concerning that this incident was not notified to the health department. What are the repercussions for not notifying? There are state laws as well as local ordinances that require notification to the health department when there is a release or even a threatened release of a hazardous material. So as I said, the district attorney has accepted this case. They will be using those state laws, regulations, local ordinances to bring actions if they choose to do so. Who's paying for the investigation? The local industrial safety ordinance here in Contra Costa County states that the facility will pay all the costs associated with investigating the case. So that includes TRC, the consultant that was hired, that includes the soil sampling, that includes translation services for meetings. It includes all of those things to keep our community informed, as well as a technical aspect of investigating the case. Jenny, I will turn it over to you. I think you have some questions that maybe you can answer, and then let me know if there's anything else that you need me to help you out with. Does that sound good? I assume you can hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I was just trying to get down the general gist of the comments. I appreciate everyone providing them, and we will, reply to all the comments, but there were a couple that maybe might be helpful for you to hear about now. First, as related to like what did we do and exactly how much information can you get from that? So the report was really written not to identify risks from soil and heavy metals in the soil, but more our purpose was to identify whether soils were impacted adversely from the catalyst release. And so we did really focus on that question, and our data was collected with that purpose. However, I certainly understand you have questions about, previous or existing or conditions that may have to do with background, it may have to do with, the area that you're living in. This report is really an assessment of those soil samples that were collected after the time of the release and after the time of the rains. And I understand your concern there. However, soils or the metals like that in soil, they don't leach from soil down into water. So they do kind of stay there in the soil and will be there for often long periods of time. And so they really aren't diluted per se by the heavy rains. And I think that maybe that's a clarification that we can add to the report, make that more clear. But we certainly were testing, the intent was to test the soil for the in kind of the worst case conditions. Okay, so we use this model to predict where the deposition would be. We use the community, whatever we heard from the community, to try and find locations that would be appropriate. But we also did want to do a wide area so that we were comprehensive in that assessment, right? And one of the questions that was asked had to do with the depth. Why did you only do 6 inches of soil, not various depths? And that is because we have here at TRC, we have an air expert, and he has worked at other sites with spent catalyst issues, and we conferred with him, Gail Hofnagel, and he said that we really would not see any of those metals deeper than 6 inches. And that was consistent with the guidance that we referenced in section 2.1.2, I think, or I think it's 2.1.2. I'm sorry, I don't have the report right up in front of me, where we talked about the DTSC guidance on soil sampling. And I have the quote here. It's from their guidance for screening level risk assessment, March the 29th of 2002. And the quote is, quote, discrete soil samples should be collected from the surface 0 to 6 inches below ground surface, which is particularly important for contaminants such as lead, which generally have limited vertical mobility in the soil column. So we really were trying to get that kind of worst case look at where that spent catalyst could still be present. Now let me look at Matt, let me just take a second, look at any other questions I might be able to answer. I kind of melded them all together there, so thank you for your patience with me. There were other media that were that you commented on and had questions about, and this particular assessment was done just on the soil media, so we did not look at water, as there was a question about. And I think, Matt, unless you have other ones, I think that kind of covers it in general. And again, we will be taking a harder look at them and respond appropriately.
Thank you, Jenny. So I just want to remind everyone, there is a 45-day comment period on the report. And that comment period started on August 28th, and there was actually a mailer that went out to all the Martinez addresses that hopefully you received at your home. So the comment period will end on October 12th. And there's a number of ways that you can provide comments, but we prefer them to be in writing. So you can either send them to our office, which I can provide the address for, which is 4585 Pacheco Boulevard, and that's Suite 100, and that's in Martinez, and the zip code is 94553. You can also send those to us by email, which is hazmat, HAZMAT, period, ARP team, ARPTEAM @cchealth.org. So you can provide those comments. We're committed to answering all comments that we received during the 45-day comment period before we finalize the report. Yes.
Can I ask something? I'm just wondering, why is this investigation and enforcement process taking so long? It's been almost a year, and it just looks like it was referred to the DA, I mean, recently. And I'm just wondering, why are there any sanctions or enforced pauses in operations for the MRC? I mean, are they going to are they still operating normal?
Yeah, so the refinery is still operating. We referred the case to the district attorney back in January. In terms of their timing, you'd have to ask the district attorney on timing as far as when the case is going to be either resolved, filed in court.
Yeah.
Those are questions that are best answered by the district attorney.
So this could go on for maybe another 2 or 3 years even?
I can't speculate on timing. Those are better questions for the district attorney.
Any other questions or comments in the room?
Was it an accident?
Right.
Was it an accident? Or did somebody release?
So I think tonight's meeting is about the community risk assessment, and we're actually doing a root cause analysis, which is an incident investigation that really gets at the heart of what caused the incident. So those questions are really best reserved for the next phase of this. And there will be another public meeting where we really discuss what caused the incident. What was the actual reason or reasons that the catalyst left the facility, went up into the air and landed in the community. So I think we'll have more questions, or we'll have better answers for that once we go through the whole incident investigation process.
You do have an online comment? Jay, you're able to speak now?
Hi, yeah, this is for the health department. So what I'm hearing is, if the health department's job is to keep the community safe, for example, a restaurant makes a mistake, someone gets sick, health department goes, makes an assessment, shuts it down, or they have to figure some things out, do some cleaning up or whatnot, and the health department goes, assesses again and says, you're good to open. But when it comes to a refinery, it seems like they can harm a whole community or make mistakes and nothing happens to them. Health department is saying our hands are tied. It's the DA. Then we go to the DA. The DA says, oh, wait till we do our assessment. So no one can do anything to a refinery. They can just keep operating with all their mistakes and everything they've done and nothing gets done. It's just go talk to them, go do this, go do that, putting everyone in the community running in circles nonstop. It's just, that's what this is all sounding like to me.
Thank you for your comment.
Are there any other comments?
That's all we have.
Thanks.
No, I just wondered, who is Jenny Phillips associated with?
She's with TRC, the contractor. The toxicology firm that did the soil sampling and analysis.
And who is funding them?
They're under contract by the county health department, but that contract will be paid for by MRC because we will seek cost recovery through the industrial safety ordinance.
Okay.
Thank you. Before we wrap up,
Yeah, one more.
okay, one more.
Heidi Taylor, you can talk now. You have 2 minutes.
Hi all, thank you. I am concerned about the cumulative effects in our town of being so close to a refinery for so many years. And I'm wondering if we might be able to ask county health or whoever for a soil comparison with another city near us that is not so close to a refinery. I'm actually interested in what their soil looks like and where we are, because if this keeps happening, then clearly the background levels are going to just, anytime there's a release, it's just going to fall within background levels. I'm not interested in that. I want to know, you know, what we should be if we didn't have all of those releases all of the time. And so if anyone could get us that information, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to turn it back over to Supervisor Federal Glover for any closing comments. Supervisor Glover.
Okay, certainly I want to thank the audience that's here tonight and have participated and asked your questions. For those that have not been answered, we will try to get those out to you. Again, the comment period is ongoing until the 12th, I think I heard, October. So we look forward to those comments and certainly responding. Once again, I just want to go back and thank our Oversight Committee as well as a health department for getting to this point where we're able to try to move forward and find these solutions. As stated, the root cause investigation is still ongoing, as well as the DA's office and the investigation as to whether there will be any actions taken on that part. So thank you all for your presence tonight, our presenters, as well as our public with the various concerns that not only you have, but that we, the county, have also. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Glover. Thank you to everybody who came out tonight on a Monday night and gave up your time, as well as those on Zoom. We appreciate hearing your comments and look forward to getting more answers when we can. So thank you all. Good night.